Yo, I'm Godin and I'm developing a game in solo, and this month I've dropped my color paint bucket on my environment and transformed the landscape into Rainbow Mountain. Also, I set up the Steam page for Silk Road project. It's now live and I'm not gonna lie, it feels good to see the logo and thumbnails of my own game in the Steam app. It makes the game even more real. So, if you haven't already, please go ahead and wishlist the game. It's just a click for you, but it makes a huge difference for me as a developer. A high wishlist count is a great indicator of public interest and can be really helpful when looking for business partners and funding. Your support can make a big impact on the project development. Right now, I'm working on Silk Road project during my spare time, as I have a full-time job, but I'd love to find a way to fund this project so that it can become my main activity, and every wishlist helped me reach this goal, so I can't thank you all enough for your support. Okay, back to business. Let's see what else I did this month. So, I continued adding and polishing custom props assets, mainly those mountain peaks, using the same workflow I've detailed in a later vlog, starting with sculpting a high-resolution version in ZBrush, then converting it into a game resolution in Houdini and texture it in Substance Painter. And with all the large props done for this environment, I decided to rework a bit the landscape again, as my knowledge of the Houdini erosion tool gets better and better, and here's the final result. When I first started working on this environment, I drew inspiration from real rainbow mountain landscapes. Now it was time to replicate that colorful stratified effect and bring it into the scene. So I did it only in shader and in world space, meaning the color is not baked in the object itself, allowing me to move and copy assets while keeping the colorful lines perfectly aligned. All I'm doing is some math to get a linear gradient based on height and a bit skewed, and then use a color curve in Unreal to assign color. The main advantage of this method is that it doesn't rely on any textures, making it super cheap. Plus, it eliminates any blurry texture artifacts for this effect. I've also worked a bit on the background landscape, the one we see behind the gameplay area. It doesn't need to be very detailed since the player will never walk there. It's only seen from far away. I did my blocking in Blender with simple shapes, then I brought it into Houdini to simulate erosion and reduce the mesh polygon count. Finally, I imported the optimized mesh into Unreal as is. Since the player will never walk in there, no need to import this as a landscape. I can treat that as if it was another props. By the way, I'm posting a video every month to talk about the progress of this game and my reflection as a solo game dev. So if you find this devlog type video interesting and want to support me, please like this video and consider subscribing to the channel. That's the best way for you to never miss a new video and support me in my journey. Okay, now look at this tree. It's ugly, yeah, but it's actually just a plate, and seen from very far, it looks like a proper tree. That's called an imposter. It's using a texture where an actual 3D geometry tree has been captured in a bunch of different angles, and the shadow picks the appropriate angle in the texture depending on the camera direction. Because of the texture resolution, it can look bad up close, but it's usually intended only for very far objects and will help in terms of performance since it's only rendering a plane per tree. So that's cover the ground. What about the sky? The old one was a skybox that I bought on the marketplace to quickly prototype, but I really wasn't a fan of how it looked and I had to do my own skybox. I decided to try something I'm really not used to, which is proper hand painting. I'm not planning on having dynamic time of day in those levels, and I should get away with a simple static texture. I started sketching directly in 3D on the dome inside Blender to get a good sense of the shape and height of clouds in relation to the environment. I then hand painted the clouds in Krita old school style. Painting is not my strength, but I'm actually happy with the result here. I should try to do more hand painting. That was fun. And with that, I'm reaching the point where I think I have a solid base for the first level. There's still polish that can be done, but I feel it's now good enough for pre-production phase. Frankly, it went smoother than I anticipated. I gave myself until the beginning of winter to make a shippable level, but I feel I'm already there and can switch back to gameplay. So I'm starting now my next big objective, which is completing this level with a gameplay perspective. I need to add objectives, enemies, and a sense of progression in this level. My first order of business was to implement a framework for arenas. The level is linear, punctuated with a bunch of arenas, and each time the player walks into one, an impenetrable barrier will activate, locking him inside until all the foes are defeated. To manage this, I need a system that handles enemy spawning and activates the next waves once the current enemies are defeated. This manager will also need to control animations and cinematic introductions when an arena is activated or cleared, as well as manage UI effects. Talking about UI, the last time I tried to do some UI art was when I was working on the fishing minigame, and that wasn't glorious. Well, the second attempt wasn't much better either. I definitely will have to try to improve my skill in that domain. I still don't have a good idea of the art style I'm aiming for, to be honest. I want something that respects the theme of the game, which is mixing urban street art with traditional Central Asian design inspired. But the search continues on this topic, I guess. That's not all I did this month. I also created a cool little tool inside Houdini that applies close simulation to objects directly inside Unreal that conforms to the environment. It's not a dynamic solution, and it actually baked the mesh into a static mesh, so it's super cheap for things that don't move. That's useful for things like carpet, clothes sheets, and stuff like that that's laying on the ground. Finally, I spent some time trying to add post-process filter to the image that simulate a painterly look. The method is called Kuwahara filter, and very basically it's like a blur effect that keeps sharp edges, and it almost mimics the brush strokes of an illustration. The effect is only applied on the environment and is stronger on further objects to keep the crispiness of the image on close view. And that's it for this month's recap. That was a productive month of June, and I'm happy to feel for once I'm ahead of schedule I gave myself. Once again, don't forget to wishlist the game on Steam if it's not already done. Thank you so much for your support, and see you soon for the next monthly DevLog.